This is the Ophthalmology Business Podcast, where we help you develop your ideal practice with help of other doctors and experts. The topics we cover include marketing, management, leadership, recruitment, HR, mindsets, and more. I am Naren Arul Raja, the founder and one of the co-hosts of this podcast. Every listener of this podcast is welcome to join the Ophthalmology Business Academy, www.obacademy.org. The membership is on us, and it's our gift to you. Today, I'm excited to talk to Dr. David Lazar, ophthalmology surgeon, as well as the owner of Lazar Retina. And the topic we're going to be talking about is lessons from starting a practice in a competitive market such as Los Angeles. Everything he learned that perhaps you can benefit from, regardless of what stage of career you are in. Before we jump in, I want to first welcome Dr. Lazar to the podcast and have him introduce himself. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what got you into medicine, specifically ophthalmology.
Great. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me on. I really, really appreciate being here this morning. I guess my father was an oncologist, so that always got me interested into medicine from an early age. That got me, I guess, my interest level as far up to medical school. And during medical school, I shadowed a pediatric ophthalmologist here in Los Angeles. And I got really interested in ophthalmology because it's one of those rare specialties in medicine where you're not just in the clinic, you're not just in the OR. It has a nice mix of both. And then also the surgeries themselves are really elegant surgeries. They're not, these big neck dissections that you would do with ENT rotations or big abdominal Whipple's procedures. I found them to be very interesting surgeries. So it kind of had a little bit of everything I was looking for. So that's what keyed me into ophthalmology itself. After medical school, I did residency in New Orleans, general ophthalmology, and then retina fellowship, vitreoretinal surgery fellowship, 2 years in Boston. After which I came back to LA, where I'm from, and joined a big group practice. This was, at the time, we were 5 retina-only surgeons, and I was there for about just under 2 years until I decided to start my own practice.
That's great. When did you decide to start your own practice? Perhaps you can start at the beginning and tell us a little bit about the decision to start your own practice and also kind of walk us through the timeline so we kind of get up to today. Where are you at today? Okay.
So I guess I after fellowship, came back to LA where I'm from, joined this group practice. It was fantastic. Got a lot of surgery, got a lot of kind of real world exposure to how ophthalmology is practiced in the real world, right? I mean, we're all kind of sheltered during our training about how we think ophthalmology is practiced. But then when you go into the real world, you learn a lot very quickly. And one of the lessons I learned is that there's so much more to medicine and delivering high quality care than making the diagnosis and executing good treatment. It sounds counterintuitive because you think that that's all medicine is, but actually that's just like the tip of the iceberg. Our patients, especially in a retina surgical practice, they're in a very, very vulnerable position. Usually when they're seeing you, they're scared when they're meeting you for the first time because they've either lost vision or are losing vision or have told that they need to see a retina surgeon. And even a lay person understands that that's not that's a serious thing. And so they come to you in this very vulnerable state. And if you're a physician who's just focused on make the diagnosis, give the treatment, and get out of the room as quickly as possible, you neglect the whole other aspect of delivering medical care, which is caring. And if you understand, and I'm sure we'll get into this, how ophthalmology and retina practices specifically are practiced, you need to take time. You need to take time and make purposeful practice management decisions to deliver that level of care. And so once I realized all that, it was a no-brainer to start my own practice because the only way I could control those variables to the level that I wanted was to do it myself. So I started my own practice, and I'm now in year 3.5.
That's awesome. Um, so you're in year 3.5. So let's start by talking about, you worked for a group practice for 2 years. Why did you decide to go solo? Like, what were you looking for, perhaps, that you are not getting in the setup you were part of at that time?
Well, I was just looking to deliver medical care the way at the level that I wanted to do it. I mean, it's really that simple. And when you have partners, no matter how great they are, you're always going to compromise on something. You gotta make every partner happy. They might not want to spend money on, this, or they might want to spend money on that, or they might not want to open an office here, so once I realized that, hey, I want to deliver a level of care at this level, and I can't. In order to do that, you just got to be able to make your own decisions, and you can't ask every person in the room permission to do everything. So it really was that simple.
Yeah, I get it. I have friends who are doctors and they struggle with this. I mean, they are in group situations, and it's just like when you have 5 people involved, everyone has an opinion, and it's almost like, in leadership, you need a vision, you need a direction. Like when you have 5 people with 5 visions, it's really hard to, do anything. That's kind of makes each of you happy. So it's better to kind of do your own thing, I guess, if you want to. Yeah.
It's better in some ways, and it's certainly harder in other ways. But yeah, I think obviously you're right.
Right. I mean, in terms of, if you are the kind of person who likes autonomy and independence and doing things the way you like to do them, make quick decisions, then this would be, I guess, very fulfilling. What are some, like, I bet starting a practice in a market like Los Angeles is not easy, right? Because lots of competition, everything is expensive. And so you probably needed a lot of different revenue streams, especially in the early days, like as you were kind of starting from zero to make the numbers work and make your practice a viable practice. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And yeah, absolutely. When you're in a saturated area like LA, you're not going to just open the doors and patients are just going to be waiting for you at the door. There's a ramp up period. I also was lucky enough to have COVID start about like 8 months into my opening my practice. So that was an interesting twist. So with different revenue streams, the options are you could do medical legal work, where you work with lawyers to give depositions. I don't personally do that, but I know that it can be, a nice kind of side job. You can, what I did was I worked and still do actually work in another comprehensive ophthalmology practice, and I do their retina work. So 1.5 days a week, I drive to this other practice where there's 5 comprehensive ophthalmologists. I'm their retina guy. I see the patients, and then I go back to my office. So that kind of provides a outside revenue source that keeps the lights on and keeps my overhead down while my private practice is growing. So there's that. You could do clinical trials, assuming that you have the right kind of patient mix. If you get involved in clinical trials, that can be a nice revenue stream, and you don't need to have super high volume of patients. You just have to have the right kind of patients. Certain hospitals will pay you to take call. So it's not that the pay itself is that lucrative, but it's nice to get a paycheck. And then it's also the patients that you see, you bill for, and then you keep them as your own patients. And then, depending on how entrepreneurial you are, my wife and I started a company. It's a cosmetic device company that generates hypochlorous acid, which is this compound used in ophthalmology to clean eyelashes. And we've done that on the side, and we're growing that, and making sales, and it's finally starting to generate revenue. So that's just for the extra. I think for the overachiever, I don't think that that's necessary, and it certainly was a lot of work. But
is your wife a doctor, or she has a more?
No, she has a big business background. She was Wharton, Columbia Business School kind of deal. So she's the brains of the company, and I'm just kind of the medicine side. So it's been a good partnership.
Great. Does she help you with your practice?
100%.
Right.
100%.
So she helps you with strategy and things like that, or does she even get into management and like operations day to day?
Everything that you just mentioned. One of the biggest things about solo practice, right? Not having partners and also starting a practice from scratch, which they don't teach you in medical school, is that you make a lot of assumptions, right? You don't know, right? And something that my wife has taught me is that you have to test your assumptions before you implement them. And that I give her total credit on that. And so, for example, when I was looking at office buildings, okay, which office building should I join? Should I join this office building over here or this office building over here? Well, this building over here had no other medical doctors. Okay, it was mostly accountants and dentists and that kind of thing. And the rent was cheaper. Or I could join this building where there was other ophthalmologists, very, very prestigious ophthalmologists, and the rent was a lot higher. And so my assumption was, it doesn't matter, they're going to see me anyway. Why spend money on higher rent, higher overhead? Who cares who else is in the building? And then I tested that assumption. And I surveyed about 50 other doctors. What do you think? This, that, and the other. And I ended up going with in the building that has other ophthalmologists because I just felt that it would help lend credibility to the practice and kind of, obviously there would be referrals that would go through the building, and I ended up paying more for rent and overhead as such. But it was an assumption that I made and thank God I tested it because it's been a great building.
I still didn't understand. How did you test it again? Like, how did you?
I just surveyed. I asked all my physician friends, different specialties. I called up a dermatology friend. I said, hey, listen, I told him the situation. He said, yeah, you want to be with other ophthalmologists. Almost universally, they said, be in a building with other ophthalmologists, especially if they're kind of more prestigious and well-known, and it just would be better for practice building.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great. Let's kind of go deeper. Your wife, you said Wharton, Columbia, so probably a lot of finance background. One of the mistakes I see startup practice owners make is they don't plan the cash flow. They think they're going to open the door and then all of a sudden there's going to be unbelievable amount of new patients and they're making money from day one. But that's not the reality, right? When you're doing a startup, because 0 people know you, like you, and trust you. And 0 means your revenue is 0, but your expenses are what they are. Your rent is what it is. All your leasehold improvements, the monthly payment is what it is. Your team members are going to cost. So talk about cash and how you manage cash. Did you have a budget? Did you expect the worst case? I'm just walk us through it, because this is the one pitfall I see 70% of startup doctors making, and then many of them give up. They say, oh, it's too much, I can't deal with it, the stress, and then just sell it to somebody else, at a big loss.
Wow. Well, if they're looking to sell, give me a call. So I didn't pencil out, I'm going to need this amount and this amount, because there's so much there's so many unknown variables in terms of costs that come up that you just can't possibly account for all of them. In the beginning, that is. But I did do this and it really helped. So when I negotiated my lease for my office, for my space, I told them I had to sign a 5-year lease. They wouldn't even let me in the building unless I signed a 5-year lease, which, whatever. It was something, separate topic. But I said, okay, fine, I'll sign a 5-year lease, but I don't want to pay a penny for the first 4 months. I said, I'll pay, you could roll that money down the road, I'll pay you, but I want at least 4-month runway where I don't have to pay anything. Okay. And again, because I was accounting for the fact that in the beginning, I'd be seeing 1 patient a day, 2 patients a day, which really helped me, it really helps just having a little bit of a runway where you don't have to pay anything for rent. I did the exact same thing for all my camera. Retina surgeons, we have to buy very expensive cameras. OCTs and fundus cameras. I was buying $200,000 worth of cameras. And in those leases, I did the exact same thing. I negotiated in a way where for my fundus camera, I paid $99 a month for the first year. And then my payments went up to $3,000 a month. Okay. But I didn't care about that. I cared about the first year. And so paying $99 a month for a year was a lifesaver, just like the rent. And so just giving yourself a little, just pushing the bills that are coming, but pushing them down, I think is all that's really needed. And then assuming you can execute on getting patients in the door, the rest is, it all kind of falls into place.
How long did it take you before you were kind of break even, meaning you're like making enough to at least cover the expenses?
Well, only 2 months, because as I mentioned, right, I was paying nothing for rent and I was paying up $99 a month for my imaging. So it was really just my EMR, my insurance, my employees. And I broke even at 2 months too.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's great. And were you like careful with your money in the early days? Like how many team members did you hire? Like, I mean,
one. You start with one. If you start with more than one person, I mean,
right.
Why do you need more than one if you're starting a practice from nothing? I mean,
right.
Yeah, you hire, what I did, which worked for me, is you hire one really good person, really excellent. You pay more than you probably want to, high quality, can can do a lot of different jobs. And that's important.
So this person is more of a technical person or a management person or both?
Both. He helps me with billing, he helped me with billing. He helped me with working patients up. He helped me with, everything.
Is he still with you?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
is he like the manager or he is?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's like a win for him as well, right? So because as the practice succeeds, he grows with it and he benefits from it as well. So that's awesome. So, but you did end up paying him more, even though
I pay him.
You could have hired somebody a lot cheaper.
Correct. Yes. You know what golden handcuffs are?
Yes. Makes sense. What's some advice you would give someone thinking of starting a practice? You gave a lot of tips already, but this is just give me some bullet points. Knowing what you know, what would you tell them?
There's just so many personal things that go into it. I mean, your risk tolerance and where you are and what your vision of the practice is. And it's really hard just for general tips. I mean, I would obviously encourage anyone who wanted to do it. I would never say don't do it. I think it's great. It's one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. But there's a lot that goes into it, and it's stressful, and you have to learn a lot. So I would just say go for it, and just understand that no one is taught any of this stuff in medical school. So you have to just be flexible and learn as you go, and ask a lot of questions. And that's all I did. I mean, there's no like secret sauce. It's just ask as many questions, talk to as many people who have done it. And some people will say things that you think are smart, and some people will say things that you think are like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And you don't have, but I think that's pretty much it. But it's a great career path because it keeps things exciting.
Two questions. One is, did you spend a lot on leasehold improvements? Just give us some color, because I know sometimes people sink a lot of money into just making it perfect the way they want it, and that can be draining as well.
Yeah, I mean, what is a lot? I mean, in Los Angeles, a lot is probably different than a lot in other places. You have to understand my practice to understand that answer. And my practice is, I don't work with any HMO insurances. I don't work with any insurances really that are kind of lower paying. So I'm really just Medicare with secondaries and PPO insurances only. And it's really kind of a practice where I'm not trying to see 50 patients a day. I'm trying to see like 30 and just deliver really excellent care. And so understanding that kind of environment that I'm trying to build, I wanted to make my office look nice, because it would be inconsistent with what I was trying to do if you walk in and it looked like a shack. Right. So yeah, I spent only the amount of money that I thought was necessary to kind of deliver that vision. Right. I don't have like flat screen TVs on the walls because I don't think that's necessary at the beginning. Mm-hmm. But it certainly is nice. And I spent a lot of time designing it, and the layout and the furniture and the color scheme and all that stuff. And I do think it's important. If if it's consistent with the practice that you're trying to build.
Yeah, I guess the key is to manage the cash flow, right? If it's a burden on you, then it's a problem. As long
Well,
as
of
you can
course, right,
make your
right,
payments make
right.
sense, then
But what I'm saying is, if you're trying to build a practice that's volume based, where it's just you're trying to see 80 patients a day, get them in, get them out, why do you need to spend money on comfortable
makes sense.
furniture? They're not even gonna, just get
They
them in.
don't, they don't care. Yeah.
Right, just make sure there's enough standing room, and that's it. So it just make sure that it's consistent with what you're trying to.
Yeah, it's like you can be very successful having a Best Western or it's Carlton. It doesn't mean that
Right.
one is right or the other one is wrong. It's they are both different businesses.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just you have to know what your vision is and make sure that everything kind of goes with that vision. What do you think the future of private practice will look like? Do you think there'll be a lot of you solo entrepreneurs going out and doing their own thing? Do you see a lot of you right now?
No.
Most of your colleagues working for large groups and that's all they're going to do?
Right. So I can only answer, understand that my answer is based on the fact that I live in Los Angeles. Okay.
Right.
I think that there's going to be like a split in private practice, and it's going to look like either you're going to be part of this big healthcare organization like UCLA or Cedars-Sinai, or you're going to be in a solo private practice, high-end kind of situation. And there's going to be no middle ground. What's going on now is that these big healthcare organizations, UCLA, Cedars, and private equity groups are buying up all these individual practices like me. They're just buying them up every day. They're getting bought up, and they're growing the Cedars or UCLA brand, and they're growing into these mega healthcare organizations. And their model is the volume-based model. See as many patients, get as many people under their umbrella as possible. In my opinion, it's impossible to deliver the type of this super premium type of care in that model. I might be wrong, but I don't think it's possible. So I think that the private practices that are still left that aren't in that in those groups, you don't want to compete against them. So you're not going to do high volume base. You're going to have to do premium, low volume premium. And that's going to be like people like me. Did that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. Now, I'm an entrepreneur. I like to analyze businesses. So what are their pros, meaning the high volume practice groups, versus what are your advantages? I'm asking as a patient, like why should a patient go to you or go to them?
It all depends on what you want as a consumer, and the patient is the consumer in this model. The surgeons, the retina surgeons in LA, they're all fantastic. I mean, I know all of them, and they're all top quality surgeons. So it's not like I would never say you're getting a better surgeon if you go X or Y. Everyone really is excellent, which is great for patients. Which means that it's just about the experience that you want as a patient. If you're getting the same surgeon, the only thing that's left in this healthcare delivery is the experience. Do you get to spend time with your doctor? Does the doctor know your name? Does the doctor call you after the surgery? If you're a patient and you have an emergency, can you get your doctor on the phone? I mean, that's the only other variables other than like parking and magazines in the waiting room.
Right.
What do you think? I mean, what do you think the advantages are?
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent question. I see this happening across all of healthcare, right? These large groups are either buying up practices or they're part of a huge group to begin with. It's OBGYNs or dentists or dermatologists, plastics. It's happening everywhere. I do think there is a place for private practice because it's like, I can go down the street and get a coffee for $1, or I can go to Starbucks and spend $5. But many people choose to spend $5 at Starbucks because of the experience. And I think healthcare is very personal to people. So if anything scares us the most, the number one thing that scares us is losing our health, right? Those kinds of things. So because it's so near and dear to us, I think we want to be able to trust the person, or at least feel like we like and trust the person who's working on us, as opposed to this random person, it might be the best surgeon, but who we don't know, we don't like, we don't trust. So I think for that reason, I think private practice will thrive. But if you're trying to be in the middle, like you said, I don't think you will succeed. I think you should totally focus on relationships, totally focus on the experience if you're going to be in private, because that's how you differentiate. Because in the large practices, you are a number, right? I mean, you, the patient, you're just a number that's getting processed, as opposed to in a small practice, you are a human being who has a relationship with the doctor for the next 10, 20 years. And I mean, I have a relationship like that with my ophthalmologist, and he calls me, he makes sure I'm okay, and he'll send me to different tests and make sure that certain things that he's concerned about, he would check on it, as needed. So I know I'm in good hands. I mean, that's priceless, as opposed to when I went to this random large practice where before I could even see the doctor, there were so many other people I had to see. And I ended up spending like 1 minute with the doctor. And I asked him some other question. He's like, "Oh, that's not what you're here for. Sorry, I can't talk to you about it." I'm like, "Okay." I never went back. It's a mill kind of an environment. And so I do think there's a huge need for relationships in healthcare, and if you like it and you enjoy it and you enjoy people, I think it's great for you.
Yeah.
But I think the challenge is, how do you get the word out, especially as a startup, right? How do you get people to know you are different? This is who you are versus the big guys.
I don't have a crystal ball. I can just tell you what worked for me. There's a million different ways to skin a cat. I just did it by knocking on doors. I just went in person to all the practices, optometry, ophthalmology, internal medicine. And I would just, when I was not seeing patients, I'd be driving around LA, knocking on doors. "Hi, I'm Dr. Lazar. Here's my card." And, I would take 30 seconds of their time. I wasn't trying to sit down and, interrupt their office flow, but I just did that. And it's really tiring, and it is, exhausting. But that's what worked for me. Maybe in hindsight, maybe I could have tried social media and leverage it. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know if that worked, leveraging that works that much in a retina surgeon practice. But I just knocked on doors.
Makes sense. I think the other thing I've heard is like treating your referring doctors like VIP too. So in other words, getting their patients in quickly, sending them a report or a letter saying this is what you did, so they know what's going on like immediately. So like making them feel important, because sometimes they get ignored by the surgeons, so they don't like that.
Yeah, but I would just assume, in the beginning, I got all their patients in right away because
right.
I had the free time.
Bandwidth, yes.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Now, last question as we come to an end. Any special consideration for starting a private practice in a saturated market? So anything different you have to do if you're in an LA or a New York or Beverly Hills that perhaps you don't have to do in like small town or medium-sized town USA?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, if you're starting a practice and it's not saturated with other ophthalmologists, you're the only game in town. I think you can make a lot more mistakes in how you start your practice, and there's a lot more wiggle room, right? If you spend maybe too much on your build out, okay, maybe it's not the end of the world because you're going to have 1 million patients right away. Whereas if you're in a highly saturated area and your ramp up time, is longer, you don't want to be stuck with a huge overhead in the beginning. I think understanding the micro real estate is really important. For example, in Los Angeles, there's this big freeway called the 405, and it kind of cuts Los Angeles in half. And I kind of put pins on a map of where all the other retina surgeons are. And I realized that I wanted to be right next to the 405 because my concern was if I was too close east, if I went too far east past the 405, then I would neglect all the people who are west, and vice versa. Like think of the 405 freeway as the Great Wall of China. Okay, people in Santa Monica, people in the west don't want to cross it to go east, right. And people in the east don't want to cross it to go west. So I just figured, okay, I'll just be right there. So that way, when people find out where my office is, they're not going to have an issue with it.
Right.
And so I think understanding that, if you're in a very, like I would imagine like Manhattan has kind of similar type issues. Where is your office going to be based by a subway stop? Are you going to make it right there, or are you going to make it so it's remote and no one can get to you? Those kind of small micro environment things I think become more important if you're in a highly saturated area.
Makes sense. So like the details matter, because like you said, the wiggle room is not that much. Any mistake can be, deadly to you because of the competition and because
there's such great, there's so many surgeons, and the quality of surgeons here in LA is so great too, that it's, there's just there's less room for error.
Makes sense. Thank you so much, Dr. Lazar, for joining us today and sharing your experience and wisdom. I know it takes a special kind of a person to, talk about challenges, right? It's easy to talk about victories and how smart you are and how great you are, and appreciate you kind of bearing your experience. And it's not easy to start a business, especially during COVID, especially in a market like LA, and just swimming with your wins and your failures. So thank you for that. I also want to take a moment to thank our listeners. We appreciate each and every one of you. We cannot do what we do without you. If you like our podcast, please share it with your friends on social media, and please don't hesitate to write a review on iTunes or Google Play. Your reviews will help other doctors and practice owners find us. Till we meet again, wishing all of you an amazing week ahead.